Hey, this is Jeremiah. This is the Web Strategy Show, and I'm here in Santa Clara with Katie Paine.
Nice to be here.
And Katie is one of the measurement or analytics gurus out there.
I've been doing it for 20 years.
And you have she's a commentator, speaker, has a blog, has her own company, consultant, and even software. So one of the challenges that we're seeing now with this, with the data that we're collecting for measurement is you're already looking at what your media impressions are and your PR and your buzz and your click reports. But what about all this other stuff that's coming out of social media? You know, maybe actually within your corporation, there's actually 2 divisions or groups that are gathering this type of information.
Well, I think if it's just 2, you're ahead of the game. Mostly it's about 4 or 5.
Okay.
Because what you have is you have people, in most large organizations, you have people doing ongoing customer loyalty studies of some sort. Customer service and satisfaction studies that are ongoing, branding studies that are ongoing. You have all your web analytics, you have your PR analytics, you have your advertising and your marketing analytics. So you've got all of these pieces of data now, and nobody is putting it together. Very few. Procter & Gamble has started to do that with their marketing mix modeling piece. A couple of companies, Southwest Airlines, for example, they look at their PR, they do unique URLs embedded in their press releases so that they can actually tie that back to the number of ticket sales. So there are ways of taking these pieces of data and bringing them together and drawing really good conclusions. The problem is nobody's doing that.
And it's important to put all of this information together to have that holistic view. Because you can't really make any decisions about the direction of your website, which products are doing well, which message resonates, which particular graphic actually matters.
Yeah. Well, the key thing is that if you, all these disparate pieces, and everybody thinks, oh, well, I'm responsible for this. Well, no, you're not. You know, if the reason why there's this big spike, in sales, why did that happen? Well, it turns out we just did this for Epson, where we look at the blogs and we look at the media, the printer company. And they said, they sent out all these demo units of a particular printer last fall. Turns out that, yes, in fact, discussions in the blogosphere went up and everybody's happy and positive and there's more media coverage. And it turns out so does sales. So there is a direct connection. It's just that only you have to look at everything in the same way in the same time frame. I mean, the classic mistake is the fact that you got one group reporting quarterly, one group reporting weekly, and one group reporting annually, and therefore you can't compare any of the data. Step 1 is let's put it all in the same time frame.
So you brought up a good point, and Epson as a case study. There's a direct correlation, where it appears to be that there's a correlation where something that happened in the social media space impacted, sales. Mm-hmm. Now, what is a web manager or producer supposed to do now that there's this whole other set of data out there, in addition to looking at their usual web analytics, their server analytics? How do you consult somebody that has all of these different pieces?
Put everybody in the same room together is what really has to happen. And it's very interesting because you sit there and say, there's a statistic out there now that says that, 93% of CEOs are unhappy with the way their chief marketing officers are measuring their results. Well, why is that? That's because they're looking at everything in these little silos, and they're not looking at big picture. Okay, I did this, and this happened, over here on the website, or this social media initiative started, and that got this conversation going, and therefore led to this on the website. They're not telling the story. But they're not looking at the big picture, which is what's working and what's not working. Basically, what's working and what's not working. What is having an impact on getting your messages across? And what's having an impact on selling stuff? What's having an impact on getting your ideas across, whatever it happens to be?
My former manager, mentor at Hitachi, said that when he looks at his analytics, the numbers don't matter as much as their overall trends.
Right, exactly. Okay. And what is hysterical is, particularly in the agency world, they do this. They want a pie chart that says this is a snapshot in time of how we did this quarter. And the reality is that doesn't tell you anything.
Because how big's the pie?
How big's the pie?
How big's the table?
No, but what's really important is the trend. Is it getting better or worse? Is the trend going up or going down? That's what you need to know. And if it's just staying the same, if you see your web traffic or your sales or whatever is absolutely flat, and you've just spent $250,000 on a social media campaign, don't you want to know that?
Right.
Don't you want to know that you just did all this stuff and sales are absolutely flat and there's not going to be any impact?
Okay. So once you get all these people into the same room, that was like your first option or recommendation.
Mm-hmm.
Then what?
Then you have to get them all on the same page in terms of what the goal is, because that's where it gets to be real interesting. Like we just heard with, with Coca-Cola, is the goal to enhance the brand reputation, or is it just to move more cans of Coke? You got to get everybody on that same page and say this is why we're doing that.
And your measurement methodology or process, is it true that it can vary depending on what your goal is?
Absolutely, it totally depends upon what your goal is. The other piece of this is that you have to bring in people that are completely different from what we would normally consider the marketing team. I mean, in other words, what you need is somebody there who's a real statistical analyst who can sit there and say, yes, there's correlation here, yes, there's causality here, yes, there's, let's put all these numbers together and, do you have to weight them and do you have to, that's a statistician. And, the reality is the fact that most communications marketing people are not statisticians, and so you really need to bring that element of it into the room as well.
Well, there's that role of the web analyst, right?
Exactly.
So let's talk about that web analyst who is probably reporting to people that are watching this show.
Right.
Are you suggesting that they have to have new skills and when they start looking at all these different pieces? Because traditionally the web analytics looks at one data source.
Yeah.
Search and server logs.
Right. And now they have to look at a whole bunch of other data, and they have to. And it's not actually a different skill set, because frankly, if you're a good web analyst, you can probably figure this stuff out. But what you need to do is you need to use the tools that are out there, and there are many of them, including ours, that will stream different pieces of data into one database, and so you can compare and contrast the two. But I mean, here's the classic example. We worked with a school in Hawaii, and we knew that they'd done a whole bunch of PR, and there was a big lawsuit, and it was a crisis. And what they wanted to know was, did it have any impact on the reputation? Mm-hmm. And was it effective? Well, what we finally realized was the goal was to get people to go to the website and download The Will of the Princess and this white paper, communicating their perspective. And we found out was the fact that it didn't really much matter whether the press was positive or the press was negative. Pretty much any press was generating, hits to the website and whatever. Well, that tells you something. That tells you that I don't have to worry about, frankly, whether, do I need to control every negative story out there. I can take resources away from that, put them on something else, get more exposure out there, and you'll still have the same result. So the end result is what really matters, and whether it's downloads to the white paper or, click-throughs or conversions or whatever it happens to be that you're trying to get to. What you need to do is you need to say, okay, we're doing this, and this. Let's pull them all together and say, what impacts that end result?
That is a very strategic outlook. Any other points of advice that you can give or pitfalls to look out for?
Yeah, I think there is such a thing as overanalyzing and over
analysis paralysis.
Analysis paralysis
Mm-hmm.
and too much data, because I think one of the things that you can sometimes do is it's important to pull all this stuff together and do it again. But if after 3 or 4 months you're really struggling to come up with a new conclusion, stop and then do it annually. There's a point at which I think it's important to bring in lots of different pieces of data, but it may not be necessary to bring all that data together every single month and look at it if the numbers don't change that much. The important thing is having the data there when you need it. So in other words, if you're doing your budgeting in August or July, don't sit there and have all of your measurement and statistics delivered at the end of the year, because January data is irrelevant by the time July comes along. So it's like pulling all these streams together and making sure that it's all there when you need to make the decision. If there's no decision to be made, you don't necessarily have to pull all the data together.
So my last question is, as far as a web strategy goes for your website, when should web analytics or measurement be considered when creating your strategy?
At the very beginning. because I think you need to understand, first of all, what's the purpose of your website. And once you've identified that and you're starting to collect those analytics and the numbers around that, you need to make sure that that pieces of data are being collected. I mean, whether you put Google Analytics on it, or whether you actually have mechanisms to force people to register, or whatever it is that you're trying to measure, that needs to be built into the website right up front.
Absolutely. Katie, it was a pleasure. So where do you live on the internet?
On the internet, I live, that's a very good question. I pretty much live in TypePad and Google Analytics. I spend a lot of time looking at our own analytics.
You're a blogger.
I'm a blogger, and I spend a lot of time reading your blog and everybody else's blogs. I suppose if anything else, I live in and out of Outlook. It's like the RSS feeds come in and then I go out, and that's the, and then I go out and spend time. It's very interesting too that I think that shifts over time. I used to spend much more time on marketing blogs and political blogs and stuff like that. I'm now spending more and more time in some of the networking sites and Facebook and stuff like that, trying to figure out.
Yeah, I saw you logged into there.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to figure out how to measure that stuff better.
Oh boy,
so that's the next phase.
Yeah.
And since we work for Facebook, I better figure it out.
And it gets more complex now that widgets are being put in there too.
Yes.
So measuring the distributed amorphous internet and then there's the mobile hooks. You're definitely going to have a business for a long time.
You realize that I started doing this 10 years ago. I started measuring social media, consumer-generated media 10 years ago. And the first thing we did was we actually printed out every posting and read it like a newspaper article. That was how far back, how backwards we were back then. And then you sit there and you look at the web analytics today, and it's a completely different world.
Thanks, Katie. So what's your domain? Where can we find you?
HTTP, actually, www.measuresofsuccess.com is our corporate website. www.diy-dashboard.com is the ongoing demo of our software. And my blog is kdpaine.blogs.com.
And you have software consulting and
software consulting.
servicing.
We are in the same category with Symphony and Buzzmetrics and all those folks.
Great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you very much. My pleasure to be here.
Yep.